I'm Patrick O'Donnell from the Norman Rockwell Museum, and welcome to Sketch Club. This is a chance for us to take a look at Norman Rockwell's work and start to derive some lessons from it and figure out some fun things to do while looking at some of Norman Rockwell's work. So today we have a piece, Visit to the Vet, I believe is the name. And this particular piece celebrates heroes. Now, oftentimes when we think of heroes, we think of Superman or Batman or Spider-Man or Wonder Woman, somebody like that. But oftentimes we forget that heroes are people from every day, right? Doctors, nurses, firemen, policemen, all the everyday heroes that we see. And Norman Rockwell did a wonderful job of showing everyday moments. He loved to tell stories. And he would show moments that would seem not especially important, but make them special and make them important. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at some of the detail in Norman Rockwell's image, and we're going to pull one out. Now, for me, it's always fun to draw animals, so I think that's what we're going to do. All right? Now, I know when you look at this image, you think to yourself, that's way too hard. It's too busy, but it doesn't need to be, okay? What we're going to do today is we're going to practice breaking things down to their basic shapes. And when we break them down to basic shapes, once we do that, it's easier to understand and it's easier to draw, okay? So we're going to do that together now, all right? So first things first. We are looking at this puppy right here, and I am going to zoom in, all right, so we get a good look at him, okay? And here we see this wonderful puppy, right? Okay, now, when we look, it looks like a real dog, right? But remember, it's just the illusion of a dog, all right? It's paint, but when we look at it, fur looks like fur, eyes look wet, the nose looks shiny, right? It looks like a real dog. So when we draw, we want to create the illusion of how things look. All right, so let's get started, okay? First thing we want to do is when we look at the image, we want to try and find big basic shapes. What do I mean by big basic shapes? Just what you're thinking, okay? Look at that, square, right? We've been practicing that for time immemorial. Triangle, okay? Rectangle, circle, right? Nothing fancy, nothing we haven't learned before. And we look for these shapes in the image, okay? So, looking here, we have what appears to be a very complicated drawing of a puppy dog. But let's break it down. First, when we look at the image, first thing we'll see is a rectangle right there, right? And then I see a square here. And it's okay if your images or your shapes overlap. Doesn't matter, right? So now we're going to zoom out a little bit and we're going to go over, okay? And I am going to pick something black. Now, very important, when we start to draw lightly, okay? We don't want to push really dark and really hard because right now we're just building our image. And when we're building our image, we don't want to have to fight later on to draw and pick out the lines we want, okay? And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that as we get there. But for right now, early sketching, just remember, we want to draw lightly. Just nice and light, something like that, okay? Excuse me, nothing too heavy. So, As we look at the puppy, here we are. We've got a rectangle. So I'm gonna nice and lightly put a big rectangle right here. Okay. Nice rectangle. That rectangle is going to be, oh, see, it's a little light. I hope you can see it. There's that rectangle. All right, and about halfway through, right, we see a square. So I'm going to block in a simple square. All right, so we put that down. Those are two shapes we found, yeah? Well, what about the ear? When we look at this ear shape, right? What is the shape of the ear? Well, let's try this. What shape is that? Very basic, right? Triangle. We already talked about it. And as I look at where it's placed, all right, I realize it's just lower. Just lightening my pencil here. Oops, probably not red though. I'm gonna go lighter still. Nice and light. So we got these two, we got a rectangle, we've got a square, and now I'm just going to put triangle. Okay. Nice and light. Then we can move that around. And you'll see what I mean by that as we move forward through the image. Okay? As we look at this, let's look at the features, right? Right now, you can already see a basic shape of a puppy dog. So we've got our basic forms, but we need to add details, right? Dog can't see us, right? Because he has no eyes. So if we look over here, and I hope you can see that red, see that? There's another triangle shape, right? So over here, very lightly, and it's shaped, or located rather, where the rectangle meets the triangle, right? So right about here. So look at nice big, nice and light, simple triangle. All right. Let's look at the nose. The nose is right over here at the top corner of our rectangle, right? Just like that. So all we'll do is we'll come over here, nice and light, and we will just put the nose. Okay. Now, a little puppy can see us, he can smell us, he can hear us, but he can't talk to us, right? Because we got to draw the mouth. So we want to draw the mouth. Now, the mouth in this is a shape, but it's not a big full shape. It's just a line. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if you look right here, here's a line, right? Not unlike when we draw a bird in the distance, right? You can draw it a little bit like this. That's kind of the shape we get right there. So right, looking at the shape of the rectangle again. Here we go. There's one part of the line. And then if I look, it ends right before the eye. See that line? Shows me right where it ends. So I'm going to draw just like that, with a little circle at the end, okay? And look at that. Already, we have a pretty convincing puppy, right? But let's go a little bit further. So when we draw our puppy, is his head completely square? Is he made out of cement? No, of course not. He's a dog. And dogs have particular structure underlying their fur. In this case, what we have is this shape right here. You see how the forehead and muzzle slopes. So now we know where those are located because we blocked out our shapes. So what I'm going to do is, using my image as a guide, I'm just going to gently create that slope. Okay. See how much better that looks already? That already looks more organic, right? It doesn't look like it's been made out of a machine. It looks natural. Now we take a look over here at the top of the puppy's head, okay? And you notice that the veterinarian's hand wraps right around it because he has his hand resting on there, okay? So for that, we're just going to go right over, boom. And then we look for the shape right here, okay, which is just another simple line. Okay. And remember, there's no mistakes, okay? When we're doing images at this stage, we're just putting down marks. We're just trying to figure out where everything lands. We're not worried about details. We're not worried about making it look awesome. We'll get to all that. Right now, we're just planning our image and putting things down where we think they need to be. All right, as we continue, and we have the puppy dog's eyes here. I'm going to add a little bit more detail. Okay, kind of make it look a little bit like a circle. So it looks like the eyeball is sitting inside the head, okay? And I made my nose a little big, so I'll just bring that down a little and round it out, all right? And then, as we know, puppies have muzzles, and they have a little line right here under their nose, and our puppy does too. And when I draw that, I notice it's a little bit longer, so, or mine's a little bit longer, right? So I'm gonna bring this up and redraw that line. See, no worries. And then what I'll do, just erase that line, right? And as soon as we start to draw and color things in, you'll never even notice the difference. All righty. So let's keep going. If we look really closely, and this is where, don't forget, illustration doesn't live here, right? We all have hands, okay? And our hands all look the same. My hand can't do anything that your hand can't do. Illustration lives up here, looking at how things work. When you look at a tree, how do you know it's a tree? What's the visual information? When you look at grass, how do you know it's grass? When you look at a dog or a cat, how do you know they're covered in fur? I mean, I hope they're covered in fur. But when you look at a floor, how do you know if it's wood or it's carpet? When you look at a car, how do you know it's made of metal? Your eyes are receiving the visual information that tells you how things are made. What we, as artists and illustrators, do is recreate that visual information so we can create the illusion of those things, right? The illusion of texture, the illusion of fur, the illusion of form, all right? And we're gonna get into that in just a little bit, but for right now, if it doesn't look exact, don't worry about it. We're all right, we just keep going, okay? And we can change, remember, it's just a pencil. We're not writing this. This isn't being chiseled in stone. Unless you're an engraver, in which case you're stuck. All right, so moving on. Here we have the corner of the mouth. And when we look close, all right, you can see right here, kind of circular in shape, right? So come back over, zoom out a little bit. You don't want to get too close to your work either. At this stage, we want big, bold strokes, okay? Nice, see? Simple, and then see that line comes in and down, and then right at the corner of his mouth, right there, I hope you can see that, we've got that little triangle shape, right? When you start to flatten things out and just look at them for what they're made of, you realize it's just shapes. So here we go, okay? And then on the other side of the muzzle, We can get a little line coming around. And as I look at the ear isn't a perfect triangle, but that's okay. You see how it wraps? We just make it look like it's resting on his head, just following the form that Mr. Rockwell put in for us. And as we do that, you see, I'm not erasing any lines. I didn't even erase the basic shapes that I put in, but you don't even notice them. All right, keep going, and there we go. All right. Nice. Okay. So what we have here, we just started off with a rectangle and a square and a triangle. And now, look at this. We have a full puppy. How cool is that, right? So now we're going to get into the interesting parts, which is making it look real. Now, how do you make things look real? Well, when we look at this puppy and we look at the puppy that Norman Rockwell drew, they don't look the same, do they? Ours is a line drawing. We know it's a dog, but it doesn't look real. It doesn't look like it's made up of fur and eyelashes and a nose, right? So how do we get that? How do we make that? Well, the answer is called rendering. Now, what is rendering? I'll tell you, okay? Here we have one of our very basic shapes. And I don't know why it's squaring off like that. But regardless, okay? That's a circle, right? What do we do with a circle? Can we pick it up? No. Can we bounce it? No. Can we throw it to a friend? No. Because it just looks flat. How do we change that? Well, let's take that very same circle. We're going to move over, right? Now, I'm on a computer, so I'm able to duplicate drawing it. Very simple. It's always good practice to keep drawing. So here we are, new one. Now, I'm going to imagine that light is coming like this, right? You know how when you draw a flashlight, or if you have a flashlight, so just so we can imagine, I'm going to draw an old school Scooby-Doo style flashlight, right? Okay. There's our flashlight. And when the light comes out, it comes out in a cone shape, right? When you flash it around. Well, imagine that cone shape is right here, okay? Here's our little flashlight. And it's intersecting with our circle. What happens is everything where these lines connect, everything behind it is going to be in shadow. This side's facing the light, and this side is facing the shadow. So what we can do is very lightly take our pencil and shade that in. All right? Here's a cool trick you can do. If you take your finger with your pencil and you just blend, right? Just like here, you can rub it. Okay, I'm gonna lower mine. Mine's gonna get darker as I add on, but that's okay. All right. Just soften that transition, because a circle or a ball or a sphere is not a sharp shape, right? It doesn't have corners. It's round. So the shadow gradually goes around. All right. So now, here we go. Okay. All right. Now, what is the next part? The next part is when on a sunny day, you're outside, you're playing, you happen to look down. What do you see? Peter Pan chased this a lot. Shadow. Okay. If objects are in light, they're blocking the light from hitting another surface, and that's called a cast shadow. So this is the shadow that the ball will cast on the surface. And it's going to be just like this, right? So this is just, again, don't forget your basic shapes. What shape is this? It's just an oval, right? Nothing fancy. But put it under the ball and shade it in, right? And what do we have? We've gone from a circle, right, to our 3D version, which is called a sphere. And what's the difference between them? The sphere looks real. The sphere looks like you can pick it up, okay? This is called rendering. And rendering is just adding lights and darks, which is light and shadow, to an image to make it look more real. So a good way to test your range of values from light to dark is to take your pencil just like this, right? And see just how dark and just how light you can get your pencil. Now we're drawing on white paper, or the screen in my case, but what we can do is we can really push those darks, right? So see right here, I'm just going to keep working in. Okay. See how dark that gets, all right? And the more I bring that up, nice and light, nice and soft, okay? And bring some of that shadow back down, okay? It's light. What does that do? Right? We have a sphere. Perfect. Okay. So what does all that mean? Well, let's take these concepts of light and dark, or what's called value, right? And we're going to look at the image that we already did. Now, the circle, okay, in our image is, let's find it here, our puppy, right? There's our basic shapes. But now we want to add light and shadow to make it look real. Here's a great trick. When we look at the image, any image or anything at all, and you want to know what the values are, the lights and the darks, and you want to be able to see them better, what you do, squint your eyes, okay? Look closely. That's a real close one. And here we have, okay, dark, right? Squint your eyes. See this dark shape here? Okay. There's that. The dark of the eye, the dark of the nose, right? And then the dark of the mouth. And that's really the darkest darks of what we're drawing. So, step back a little bit, okay? And I'm going to go, and I'm going to very lightly start to block in. And I'm going to keep looking for shapes. I'm going to keep looking for the shapes of the shadows. So you see that shape, right? It's just a patch of dark. So I'm going to go over here. See that shadow goes over by his eye. Very lightly block it in. Still messy. We're not worried about that. We've got all the time in the world. There's no right or wrong. We're just doing. We're having fun. We're building up value, right? Because we'll be able to blend this. We'll be able to make it look like fur. Right now, we're just blocking in our shadows. And that's all it is. Blocking in our shadows, right? Make my brush a little bit bigger. Okay. What else did we say? We said the eye, right? So there's a very simple shadow. A nose, right? And it looks right here under the nose, right? Okay. And then right here under the chin, a little shadow. Oop, right here under the eye, looks like there's a little bit. And take a look. Take a look at this image. See what you see, right? All right, now we're starting to get somewhere. So, as I look and I squint my eyes, it looks like right here, right in here is a little bit darker. So I'm going to push that. Okay, push it a little further. Remember, pencils, crayons, doesn't matter what we're working with. Okay, it doesn't need to be expensive and it doesn't need to be fancy to be fun. All right, as I said, illustration lives here, right? Through observation. And just looking and seeing. Once you see things, then you can draw them, right? So here we are. The side of his head looks pretty dark. Every once in a while, we don't want to forget to step back and look at our drawing and compare. Okay. See, just adding, never touching an eraser. We can erase, but we don't need to yet. Because nothing can be wrong at this point. Nothing that can't be fixed with just a little bit more rendering, right? And it looks like back here is a little darker. So I'm going to add a little more shadow, right? Now that eye, it's really dark, right? His eyes, big puppy dog eyes, right? So I'm going to start to darken those in, all right? But we do know that they're his eyes, we can tell that, and we know that they are wet, right? How do we know they're wet? Because of these little dots right here. These little dots tell us that his eye is shining and reflecting the light that's showing onto him, all right? So, draw that line. See right here the edge of basically the dog's cheekbones, right? And check this out. If you have a pencil, all you need to do is you can put a little eraser mark right in there. That's why we draw lightly. But for me, I am just going to put two little dots of white, right? Just like that. Just little shapes to indicate. I'm going to come back and tweak those. Like I said, this is very much a work in progress. Nothing set in stone. We're just moving some stuff around and trying to get our values, all right? Okay, going back here, looking right here. Now this can be a little tough to see sometimes when you're looking for values, but you see the color. It's a little bit hard sometimes. So if you squint your eyes, you can kind of see this brown patch right here in his cheek. It's not as dark as his ear, but it's not as light as the white either. So what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to lower my opacity, and I'm going to just lightly put in that shape, right? And you notice here, it's a little bit darker, so add a little bit more. Okay. And here, see, and even here where something is white, it's not necessarily 100% white, like the white of our paper, is it? Because he's got shadow on his nose right here. Right? See that? All of a sudden we can see shapes. Now remember, we started with a square, a rectangle, and a triangle. Now look at what we've got. Now we have a Norman Rockwell style puppy. It's pretty good. See? Look at that. Look at that. Right. Oh, forgot to darken the nose. So let's go over here. Push my pen up a little bit. Okay. Really crisp that up. See? And again, puppy noses, right? They're wet. How do we know? Well, if you've ever been near a puppy, you know their nose is wet. But how do we know this puppy's nose is wet? It's shiny, right? It's got a highlight. And that's what I did right there. I just left it a little bit, a little white spot. And we can go back and tweak. Don't forget, nothing here is set in stone. We have an eraser. We have a pencil. We can always change. And if you think that even exceptionally talented artists like Mr. Rockwell got it right the first time, he didn't. What he would do is he would draw and draw and draw and practice and practice and practice and do a whole drawing of the painting before he even touched paint. He worked very hard to get to this stage. So don't be afraid of trying. Never be afraid of trying, okay? So here we go. We are going to keep pushing. Now I noticed a little detail again when we start to look closely at the image, right? See that right there? It looks to me like the other eye of the dog. Now, I put that too low for my taste, so I'm gonna take my eraser a little bit, right? Just moving it. Think of it like molding with clay. Okay. See, about halfway up. So I'll put a little line, and then we can see a little bit of the top of his eye, right? Boom. Okay. All right, some little spots here and there. Nice and light. Okay, I'm going to use my eraser. Here's a cool thing you can do too, right? Use your eraser to carve the edges of your drawing. All right, so if I want that a little sharper, okay, start to carve that shape. Start to carve the shape. A little bit off, right? Remember how I said when we start our drawing, we start light? This is why. See, you don't even notice I still have the lines from my rectangle and square right here. See? If you look close, you can see them. But if you draw lightly, you don't even notice. All right, back to painting. Here we go. So looking through here, okay, see this? This line's a little bit more curved than the way I put it. So I'm going to put that like that. And then we can see the other side of his mouth, so I'll darken that in. Right. We have his puppy lips. And then it comes around just like that. Just like a teardrop shape. Okay. Now it looks like the puppy's mouth. Now I am going to lighten this pencil. Just go a little bit lighter. Some shapes here. So I'm going to really push that. Then we will darken right here a little bit more. Okay, always squinting, always squinting. This looks a little light to me. This brown patch here looks a little, the eye's okay, but right here around the edge, see that? So I'm gonna add a little more, just to try and add a little bit more dimension. See, just like that. Here, over, pushing the shape, right? Pretty good for our first puppy, huh? Just keep going back and forth. This is dark, see? Add a little bit more here, because this looks a little too white for me. I think just want to add a little bit of shadow, just a little bit of form. Just working in the shapes. So Mr. Rockwell painted an oil painting. So oil paints stay wet for a long time, and he'd be able to move the paint around, mix, blend, and get some different effects. And so right now we're just using a pencil, but Mr. Rockwell would draw his entire painting in charcoal before he ever went to paint, the same size as a finished painting, which is pretty cool. So, yeah. Now I'm going to make something up here, just because that's where the vet's finger is. So I'm not interested in drawing that right now. So I'm just going to fake that part right there. Right. Go to my eraser, knock down that line. And that's white. There's no strong line there. So I'm just going to make it a little bit lighter. And then over here, erase that a little bit. And go back to my pencil. It's a little dark. White. And starting to shape up, huh? All right. Yeah, start to push those darks to get those shapes. See how his ear is not perfectly flat, right? It's bending and waving. And you notice too, we're not drawing the knot of his collar. As artists, we get to draw what we want, what we see or we think is important. And that's what's so great about illustration. Every single person's dog is going to look different. And that's good. It's what we want. Okay. Now, it's looking pretty good, I think, right? You add a few more spots, and I want people's focus to be on his face. So, details down here, I'm just gonna shade in a little bit. Okay, in the shape of his collar, I'm just gonna shade in just a speck, right? Because that's not where I want people's focus. I want people's focus to be right here on the face. Okay, I'll show you another cool trick. When we're drawing, his muzzle is white, and we want to show that, but a problem is our background is white, right? So how do we do that? How do we make it pop out? You know, here's a cool trick. See how dark this is right here? Well, watch what happens, all right? Let's see if I can do it. If we start to shade behind the dog's face where it's white, see how that pops out and makes the white stand right out. How cool is that? Huh? Look at that. See, especially down here in his neck where there's no lines, but how do we know it's there? Well, you can see a little bit of the veterinarian's arm in shadow in the hand. And so, look at that. Nice and soft, right? I push it. I'm going to leave it kind of white against the nose because the nose is dark, right? And that's cool. That's called contrast. And contrast is dark against light or light against dark. And what we want to do is create contrast, right, to create our values and the center of interest. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go really, really dark because the eyes are where a lot of the emotions live in a picture. So looking at this adorable little puppy, right? See how dark that is now? Just kind of very lightly, or very gently, I should say. That's not light, that's very dark. Okay. Create the shape of the puppy dog's eyes, and look at how much focus you get on that, right? Too dark. That's okay. Just bring that right. Now see, by making that really dark, we made those highlights pop out even more. Go on. Get some of the shape of the nose a little bit more because as we can see, it's not a perfect triangle, is it? Second, that white. Look at this. A little sliver of white. Right, going around. We're going to introduce some white back in. Or a lighter color. Really shore up those shapes. Really bring them out. See? And again, remember, we didn't erase any of our underdrawing, did we? No. All we did was continue to add. Right? So now let's a little bit of that violet back in. What we'll notice is when we start to get further along in our drawing, our brushes and our marks, everything goes from big to small. And we start to get into the detail. Right? So let's try and crisp up some of this ear. So much. It's pretty strong right here. And by strong, I mean pretty dark. Right. And over here. See? And to think, what do we start with? A few basic shapes, right? And here we are recreating a masterpiece. Okay? Drawing doesn't live here. It lives here. I'm going to smooth. Actually, take some dark. Use that shape. Lower it out so I can soften and blend. And don't forget, when you're using a pencil, you can blend, you can smudge, you can move things around. It's very, very forgiving. By forgiving, I just mean it's easy to work with. You can just draw the things around the house. You got a pencil in the drawer, maybe some watercolors. Right? Doesn't need to be fancy. Doesn't need to be expensive. All right. So I'm feeling pretty good about this puppy, and there's one thing that we need to do, always need to make sure you do, because when you all become famous artists, you want to make sure people know it was you, and we sign it, right? Let me darken my pencil here. I don't want anyone to forget. Right? Boom, done. All right. So, from everyone at Norman Rockwell Museum, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully you drew along, and if you did, we'd love to hear from you. So you can leave comments below on the video, or with a parent's permission, I'd love to have you send the puppy that you drew to the museum. You can email it to sketchclub@nrm.org. And hopefully in the future, we'll be able to take a look at these and see some of the drawings that you did at home while we're working together. So again, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.